and then a $700 investment. What a that's a good price, I think.
I remember laying in bed and I remember thinking like, man, if I can just get to 30,000 a year, I'm rich. Like I'm fine. You know what I mean?
When did you decide, I know, I'll read a book a week for 52 weeks? Like, how did that all happen?
So eventually he's just like, hey, I have 2 kids. I can go get a job for $90K a year tomorrow. I'm going to go do that. Right?
It's like a paradigm shift for you. It was realizing that it really came down to those fundamentals and knowing your numbers. So you started to learn how to write offers. What happened? Did you see big growth? Was it just steady growth? Did you have any like low to no money marketing strategies? Did you start this way? Is this how you always had it? Were there some defining moments for you that were really, really kind of scary moments in your business? Mike Lowden, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you being here. Founder of Loud and Clear Music School in Ohio. Your schools have grown. You got 2 locations. You got over 20 teachers. You got over 800 students, all ranging at a bunch of different ages. You started with no computer experience and no computer, actually, no business background. You taught yourself business by reading a book every week for 52 weeks straight. You built one of the most respected schools in your community. You also started and now run a digital marketing agency, Muses Digital, where you do advertising for music schools. So you help music schools across the country, not just run your own music school in your community. You also coach. You're on the coaching faculty at Build a Music School, the coaching program. So you have done a lot for this industry. It's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you this morning, Mike. I so much admire the work that you've done. I've seen you in action. I've even coached alongside you. So thank you again for being on here. And so let's talk a little bit. So like, how long have you been a musician? When did you start?
Let's see. I started at 11, I think, officially. Maybe a little bit before then. I remember my dad played guitar, but didn't play too much anymore because he was busy trying to feed the family that I was part of, right? But I remember listening to some music and then being like, man, I really want to learn how to do that. And I bugged my dad. One thing I always like to tell people is he showed me a little like scale on the guitar, like all the natural notes on the first 3 frets, right? And looking back, I now know he was just trying to get me to stop bugging him. But he was like, "Don't come back to me until you can play it this fast." And which at the time I was like, "What a challenge! I'm going to go for it." Now looking back, I'm like, he just didn't want me to bug him, right? But man, I just sat down that whole summer and I just went at it and I was on a guitar way bigger than I should have been playing. It was on his guitars and I was a little, short, chubby meatball of a kid, right? And I'm playing this dreadnought guitar and I just locked into it for some reason. And then just didn't really stop after that.
So you just love the guitar, and that's so funny. Like your dad was just trying to like keep you busy. So was he a guitarist? Like, that was what his background was?
Yeah, he was a guitarist. So there's some guitars laying around the house. Like I said, they were kind of collecting dust a little bit because he was busy. He had his own business as well. So really me playing, after a couple years really got him back into playing, which was really fun. But yeah, so he played, I know, and every now and then he would play for me. So I knew he could. So once knew I was interested in the guitar, I just bugged him incessantly until he showed me that scale that kind of started it all for me. And then I also remember it was Christmas break, the day before Christmas break, I was always allowed to open up one Christmas present. Normally, and again, looking back, this makes sense. Normally, I was able to pick it, but this time my parents said, "Open this one," and it was like a teach yourself guitar book, and it had like all the good King Wenceslases and stuff like that in it. And again, looking back, I was like, "Uh-oh," they were probably like, "Man, Mike's going to be really annoying us for 2 weeks, so we should keep him busy." But I just remember I went through that whole book in a day. I just was like obsessed. I just tore through it, man.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, I have an older sister, but she's like 11 years older than me. So she was out
Okay,
of the house by then, and
sure. So
she's not very musical. Well, I think
kind of
she
felt
is
like a
musical. She won't allow herself to be.
oh, okay, sure, sure. So you
Yeah.
guys, like a musical family in general. Like it sounds like your dad played. Did your mom play?
My mom wasn't super musical, but she was definitely we're definitely an artsy fartsy family. So she wasn't on the musical side, but she was really into the literature side. So she was, while I was getting all the music stuff from my dad and art stuff from my dad, my mom was really into all of the the classics and the humanities. So I was getting a lot of that. So definitely an artsy fartsy family. A story I like to tell just to give you an idea of how I was raised. And I don't support this necessarily, but I remember my parents, like when field day would come around, my parents would be like, a whole day at gym, like we're going to take you out of school on field day. We're going to take you to a museum and we're going to teach you about culture. That's how my family was.
That's really cool. So did you actually take music lessons, or was this more kind of like your parents giving you things?
Yeah, interesting. So my older sister that I mentioned, so she was kind of the classic tried everything for 2 weeks and quit type of thing. So my parents assumed I would do be the same way, which again, looking back is really funny, but they didn't know. So after I went through that whole thing with that scale on guitar, right? My dad in that book, my dad was shivering me more, but I didn't get my own guitar that was appropriately sized for like a year. And then I didn't get lessons until like a year after that, just because I think my parents were like, well, Mike's not going to stick with this guitar thing. Which I don't blame him for, but in retrospect, that's pretty funny.
I know for me, like I took piano lessons. That was my main instrument, and I definitely went through seasons where it was like I loved playing, and I was really into it, and then I hated it. Never wanted to
Yeah,
practice.
sure.
Um, and for me, it was like as soon as I got to a point to where I actually felt like I could play something that would impress my friends, then I like wanted to keep going. It's like
Yeah.
it had nothing to do
Yeah.
with the instrument or like the music itself. It was just I can impress my friends. I want to play more, and of course
Yeah.
develop
I think
from
that's an
there. But like
advantage guitar players have, right? Because I think a lot of us don't go through the more traditional lessons, right? We immediately just learn the songs we're listening to, a little bit more than pianists tend to in the more traditional sense, right? So luckily that bug was able to bite me a little bit more quickly as a guitar player. Because if I had a friend who liked Metallica, I could be like, I'm going to go to 911tabs.com or ultimateguitar.com and I want to learn that song. You know what I mean? Where traditional piano doesn't,
yeah,
a lot of things are switching, which I think is good. But the more traditional lessons, it takes a while to get through all the favors and the Alfreds or whatever.
yeah. Well, and I think it's like one of those things where it's like you pay your dues, and then if you
Sure.
do go through all the theory and you learn all the technique, then it's like you can get way further. But yeah, it's definitely like you have to really think long term with it. And I think too, like
Yeah.
I remember when we first started the music school, that was one of the things that I realized as a teacher, like, hey, not every kid is willing to sit through all of the, like you said, the Alfreds and the Fabers and whatever before I lose them. They don't necessarily have it's not automatic that they're just going to stay with me through that for the next 2 or 3 years until they get to the next level. So I had to like rethink that because, like you say, it wasn't the same with like with guitar. It's like, yeah, go straight to the song you like and just start jamming. But with
Yeah.
piano, I had to learn that. Um, and so, yeah, and of course, it affects a bunch of things, like when it comes to retention and when you're working with teachers and like trying to teach them that same thing. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, so for
Big
you,
lesson
like
for me too.
yeah, for you, you were like you kind of had this passion for the guitar, that almost kind of happened on accident
Yeah.
from your
Right.
parents. Where did that go? Like when
Mhm.
you were in high school, did you just keep going with it or?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, and I'm sure we're going to get into this later, but the whole, music teacher, music educator, music school, Mike wasn't on my radar forever. I pretty much knew by 13, 14 that the guitar is what I wanted to do. And I even I remember telling my friends, like, I accept the fact I'm just going to be a broke musician playing in a studio apartment. You know what I mean? But I was just like, I
Yeah.
love the guitar. That's just what I want to do, you know? Um, so that was, yeah, so all the way through high school, and then through college as well. And, you know, I was a touring musician and all that stuff. I'm sure we can talk about that. But so, yeah, that was my whole life. And it wasn't, this whole teaching side of things kind of came later. But yeah, it all started and with that guitar and pushed me all the way through.
So the guitar was kind of your thing, and like it seems like with guitar too, it's one of those instruments that is usually inside a ensemble, right? So like I
Yeah.
at least from what I've seen, it's kind of like violin players, they generally flock together. So did you have like a band or a group that you played with?
Yeah, I had tons, man. So yeah, at a pretty young age, I was out playing clubs and things like that. So especially because I listened to a lot of like punk music and stuff back then, so it's pretty easy to get into a punk band. Uh, so I was out gigging and stuff at 13, 14. And yeah, I mean, even when I was 16, 17, I remember taking the summers off and touring with some bands older than me. And um, plenty of experiences. One experience that I always think of is I remember I had to buy like 100-foot guitar cable. Maybe it was even longer than 100 foot. I don't remember. But because I wasn't allowed in this bar because I was too young to play in the bar, but I was in the band. So I literally was plugged in outside, and then my cable ran into my amp on the stage inside the club, and I had to play outside. I forget where it was. So yeah, I mean, so I had my own bands, but then I also just really was attracted to the idea of being able to do a little bit of everything. So a lot of people would call me up for different types of gigs and different types of styles. And yeah, man, blast, super fun.
Did you have somebody in your life like during those formative years, like in high school, where you were really getting into music, and was there an influential figure to you? Like, was it your teachers, your parents? Who was kind of guiding you at that point?
That's a great question because I mean I think it was a lot of people. I think whether it's because I was a guitarist or just because of the type of music I was into, I was able to meet so many different types of people. So I really kind of had this like wide array of, I definitely learned from the older punk rock dudes than me, right, for certain things. But then I did have, in high school, I did have choir directors, band directors, things like that, who obviously are going to have different life lessons than punk rockers. But were still kind of a home for me because I didn't like school that much. Again, it's funny looking back, but at the time, I just remember being so upset that school wouldn't let me just play guitar all the time. Because, like I said, I knew that I wanted to just play guitar for a living. So I was just like, why aren't you guys just letting me go play guitar? you know. But my music teachers in high school, they were kind of a home for me because of that, because they would give me these opportunities and also get me on the right path. And yeah, met a lot of older musicians. And of course, my parents were part of that too. I think more so, my parents were. Um, I really respect them for this. I'm not a parent of my own, but my parents were always very into kind of freedom. So, I mean, they made sure I wasn't going to get in a situation where I was going to die. But at the end of the day, they're like, do what you want, Mike. Like, you got to learn how to live. So, you got to go live, you know? So, I kind of had that freedom to. So, yeah, I think to answer your question, I was lucky to have a wide array of different influences for different things. Of basically looking back now, kids who just happened to be older than me, as well as kind of the more traditional music teachers. And I had a couple guitar teachers that were very influential to me. And
So you were at this point, like in high school, and you were gigging, you had teacher, like, so you had instruction, so you were definitely, sounds like you were getting pretty good.
I was able to hang. I like to say. By high school, I had gotten really into like jazz music and stuff, which you need your own certain chops for. But yeah, man. I mean, again, I was playing guitar all day, every day. So when you do that, you're
Yeah,
able to hang in most kind of situations. And I just loved
right.
music, so I would get calls for jazz gigs, for blues gigs. It's kind of my main thing, but I had my own rock bands that I would tour with. I get calls from metal, back when CDs were a thing. I remember getting a call from a metal band in Philly and being like, "Hey, like we have a CD release show today and our guitar player broke their hand. Can you learn our album?" Sure. you know. So which is so fun because just being able to explore all the different types of music, all the different types of people. Uh So I can't tell you how much fun I had.
Yeah, so you had that sounds like it. So very diverse and a lot of different experiences, even at a pretty young age. So like, so you did that through high school, and then at what point did you decide to go to college, or like kind of which direction did you want to go in college? Did you major in music or?
Yeah. So yeah, and I ended up not finishing college. And we'll get to this. I dropped out to start my music school, interestingly enough. So I decided, because like I said, I wanted to be a guitarist for a living. And quite honestly, with what I was doing, I don't it was going to be more the performance aspect than the education aspect. So you don't always need a degree for that, right? I mean, people are just going to audition you and either you can play or you can't play. But it just seemed to make sense to me at the time. I was like, well, maybe I should kind of, legitimize myself or whatever and actually go to school for music. So I went to Berkeley for a while in Boston. That was a big thing for me. And then eventually actually left Berkeley just because it was like, I was like, you can make an argument that it's one of, if not the best jazz degrees you can get, because I went to school for jazz, but I was like, do I want to be 150K in debt with a jazz degree? Like, I don't think so. you know? So I came back home and I went to the local college here in Akron for a little bit, and then just ended up dropping out again to start the school, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, it was just, I wanted to be around more musicians and I wanted to quote unquote legitimize myself. I definitely learned a lot. So I'm glad that I went for the time that I did. But yeah, again, since 13, I was like, I'm doing something with guitar. And then I was just trying to kind of fit that peg in the right hole. So for college, I was like, well, can I play guitar in college? And then, that's how I got there.
And I think for musicians, it's such a hard thing, college, right? Because it's like, it's an amazing experience. I went through this with my son actually just a couple of years ago, where he's trying to decide like, Dad, should I go to college? In his case, he was a pianist, and or he is,
Mhm.
and for him, it was like looking at the options, like, okay, because for me, I'm just like, okay, so what is the result of this, right? So you go to college, and like you say, $150,000 in debt, maybe you get some scholarships, cool, but you're still going to owe something. And so, but then what's the result? What is the piece of paper actually going to get you, right? Maybe it'll get you a
Right.
teaching gig. Maybe, if just depending on kind of where you want to go. But I think for musicians, it's a hard sell. You're going all the way through college, but just because the cost is so steep, and because there aren't a whole lot of opportunities to at least make that money back, right? Um,
Right.
and get a career that's gonna really make that worth it. So it makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's
It
good
definitely
connects.
makes
And
sense.
yeah, I remember when I was at Berkeley, the kind of like joke at Berkeley was, if you graduate from Berkeley, you must not be very good, because like the goal is you make these connections and you get picked up by some other bigger artist. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
it's really about, yeah, it's really about the connections and stuff. So I mean, I don't regret that I did it. Would I have regretted it if I went all the way? I don't know. It's hard to say, but probably, just like how you said, the end result, any gigs that I got after that, I didn't have to show any sort of, they didn't ask me for my degree. You know what I mean? If you're going the education
Right.
route, obviously that makes a lot more sense. But for me as a performer, I was just like, I don't think this makes too much sense for me. You know what I mean?
So how did you go from, okay, so you're in college, and then you come back to Ohio, then you go to the local college there, and then you decide that's not going to work, and you open up a music school. So like, w- how did you get to that point, right? Because now we're talking about starting a business, we're starting, all those different things. So something must have changed for you to get you to that point.
Yeah. So really, I mean, fundamentally, I think it goes back to just love of teaching is really kind of what started it. So, I was never necessarily in the goal of becoming a business owner, but what had happened is throughout all of this, again, so I was able to gig a lot. I was doing all this good stuff, but it's tough out there as a professional guitarist. I would say I was very fortunate. I was able to pay my rent by playing guitar and only playing guitar. Not everybody gets to say that. But it's definitely some ramen noodle nights. um, so I think like a lot of performers, I started teaching just as kind of like I mean, I'll be honest, just a way to make some extra bucks. Um, but when I really started teaching and started teaching more consistently, I really fell in love with it. To the point where, yeah, I was still gigging a lot, but I was teaching almost every day, whether it was my private students or there was a couple music schools around here that I was teaching at myself. And really, that transition was I already kind of started thinking about doing something on my own. Again, not because I necessarily wanted to be a business owner, but just because I remember going to a lot of these owners of the music schools that I was teaching at and just kind of being like, hey, what if we did this? Or we should try this. Or have we ever thought about that? Right. Um, and they were just very stuck in their ways. And I don't even remember what the ideas were. Maybe they were just bad ideas. You know what I mean? Because I think I was 21 when I started my business, right? So there might have just been bad ideas in their defense. But I remember being like, man, I should just maybe do something on my own. Um, Now, one of the schools that I was teaching at was brand spanking new. A guy had just started. It actually didn't even start as a music school, but he kind of was doing lessons as well. And when I brought this up to him, he's like, "You should be a partner in this, right?" So luckily, I kind of got kicked in the butt with that a little bit because I had this offer to become a partner rather than me having to completely start it on my own. Now, very quickly, it did end up just being me. And that's where I had to do all that self education and everything that you talked about at the jump there. But yeah, so fundamentally, it was just I love teaching, and then just with how my brain works, much to the chagrin even of my staff now, is I'm an idea guy, for better or for worse. So then I would always go, well, what if we did this and we try this and blah 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 blah. And I didn't have a opportunity to do that unless I was in some sort of controlling aspect of the school. So here we are. You know what I mean?
So, okay, so you had an offer to become a partner in this
Yeah.
venture, and that was sort of
hmm
your kind of like you said, you're kicking the pants to actually get into becoming a business owner.
Yeah, exactly. So he was not a musician, but he wanted to start his own business. He was a more kind of business centered guy, but it was music adjacent. And then because of that, he started to do lessons. He actually had another partner because in his to his credit, he's like, okay, like I don't really know anything about music, so I should be partnered with somebody who does know about music. And he was with somebody that didn't quite work out. And again, this whole time I'm teaching for him. I'm one of the first like three teachers, and then I'm bringing up all these ideas, and he's like, man, like you should just replace this other guy. You should just do this. So I remember I bought in for $700, which was a lot of money to me. I had to sweat equity that off. It took me like 8 months to pay that off.
Oh my goodness.
um, but I bought in. And then later on, he ended up uh, kind of going back to the corporate world, and it was all me. But yeah, so that was the first. He's like, "Hey, you should think about this," and I was like, all right, sure. And it kind of lined up with what I was thinking about, like I said before. So that kind of gave me the kick over the edge, and then yeah, started all from there. It's 21.
Wow, yeah, that is really young to be, getting into business and certainly like especially with a partnership. So you have obviously there's things there, challenges there that you
Yeah,
that many people shy away from. Okay, so you basically didn't know anything to your let me use your words, like you didn't know anything, you didn't know computer, you had no business training. You just said yes because you love music, you love teaching. Um, and now you're in business. And then you work and then the $700 investment. What a that's a good price, I think. How
I,
many how many students were there?
oh man, there was I mean, I think there was like 30 students or something. I mean,
Oh,
we're it
okay.
was it was very ground floor. And I'm sure he was kind of getting me a bit of a deal as well, right? I don't even remember how he calculated that. Um, but he's just like, hey, you should buy in. And like I said, I had a sweat equity. Like I taught for free for a couple months to pay that off because I didn't have two nickels to rub together. Um, but yeah, so yeah, Bob bought in and went from there.
And so you're just figuring I'm just going to teach. I'm going to own part of this
Mhm.
business. And that'll be enough to pay my rent. And I was like, did you have any kind of aspirations long term to I'm going to eventually grow this thing and maybe I'll buy him out or anything like that? Or was it more just I love to teach, I love what I'm doing. This is all I need.
I think mainly that with maybe the additional. I wish I could say I was super smart and I had a bunch of foresight and was really thinking about my future. I don't. I think I'd be lying if I told you that, David. But there was a tinge of, even at 21, because I had been gigging for so long, even as a teenager, there was a sort of overarching thing of like, hey, like, how am I going to retire? Or like, what if my car explodes? You know, because as a professional musician, you get a lot of that. And again, I'm very comfortable eating ramen noodles and just letting it go. But I was also getting more serious with my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. So I think the main thought is, even though I didn't know the particulars, it was, yeah, like you said, hey, I love music. This is going to give me a way to teach music, which I love to do, and all of that. But also, maybe this could give me just a couple extra, you know, a little bit of extra cushion, so that I can, not be as gig to gig and dollar to dollar. You know what I mean? I think was the goal. I remember too. I even just tell you. I mean, and this was a while ago, I guess too. But even then, this was a small number. But I remember thinking to myself. I remember laying in bed, and I remember thinking, like, man, if I can just get to 30,000 a year, I'm rich. Like, I'm fine. You know what I mean? And I thought this. I was like, okay, the school will be able to, at least, well, between gigging and the school, I should be able to get to 30K. You know?
Yep. 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 No, I think I know I can relate to that. Like I remember the doing the exact same thing. Man, if I could just get 30, you know. And then it's like you get
Yeah,
there and then it's
man.
like, man, if I could just get to 50, you know. And it keeps stair
Right.
stepping up until at some point you realize, I think I'm just going to keep moving the needle forward. Um, so okay, so you talked about reading all these books. I'm really curious about this because I'm a reader. I got this big library here. I love finding the next, gem that's out there.
Mhm.
Um, when did you decide, hey, I need to, improve my business chops and oh, I know, I'll read a book a week for 52 weeks. Like how did that all happen?
Yeah, pretty quickly after kind of everything became official, I would say, as I was kind of taking on more of a role at the school. Because, like I said, I had a partner still at this time, but we kind of divided up labors, and I tended to be more of the operations side of things, and yeah, I just didn't know what I was doing at all. And I'm still learning, I guess. First off, to be clear, but I think where that all stemmed from is, like I said before, my dad was kind of the musical artsy side. My mom was this like literature reading. So I was already a big reader from my mom. So I already read incessantly. So reading a book a week wasn't that crazy of an idea for me anyway. And I was interested in some nonfiction and stuff already, so it wasn't that hard of a transition. But again, I just really wanted to make this work. I needed to hit that 30K, David. Right? I really wanted to make this work. So I just thought to myself, like, well, if other people, it's kind of like musicians, right? If I want to learn something, I'm going to go to a musician better than me, and he's going to teach me that. And then it's my job to try to master that to the best of my abilities, and then make it my own thing. So the same thing goes with books. I remember thinking to myself, well, if some lady wrote a book and she's a really successful business, I'm not successful at business, so I'm going to go, learn some licks from her and try to incorporate them a little bit. And yeah, I definitely learned a lot. I mean, a lot of business books, as you probably know, are 90 or 75% fluff, unfortunately. So I learned that pretty quickly. But yeah, I just wanted to lock in, and I was 21 and uh, full of I don't even know if it was ambition, but I just really wanted to make it work. You know what I mean? And that just seemed like a logical way to do it.
Well, and it speaks to your commitment too, like of this thing. Like you didn't, it's like you talked about with the guitar when your dad first gave you that guitar, like you took it really seriously because you wanted to
Mhm.
be excellent at it, right? And so, in the same way, this guy gave you this opportunity in this business. And so what did you do? You kind of did the same thing you did with the guitar, right? At the beginning, you took it really seriously and you just like,
Yeah.
sat down and just read 50. I mean, there's a lot of business owners that haven't read half that many books, you know. Um, I'd say probably most business owners haven't read that half that many books. So it's really an accomplishment to get 52 in. So any highlights, any big influential books you want to throw
Um,
out there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are the classics. Like, I mean, I almost hate to say it. I wish I had like a hidden gem, but I think especially in kind of business book world, they're classics for a reason, you know. So I mean, E Myth was really huge for me. Obviously, I really like a lot of the Jim Collins stuff. Especially the Good to Great was really important for me. and it's been a while. I'm trying to think if there's some other good ones. There's like a lot of management books that I read from a gentleman. His name's Peter Drucker. I read a lot of Peter Drucker
Mhm.
books. And yeah, dude, I wish I could be like, oh, here's the secret. This is the one. But man, there's just all the classics. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I
No,
will
those are
say revisiting those too was really important for me. So I think reading the E Myth when you're first getting started is very different than reading the E Myth 5 years in. You know, so taking those classics and then revisiting them has been really important. I got books here. Let me see if I even have.
I'm so glad you said that because I was just thinking Alex Hormozy, who's one of my
Yeah.
he's just fantastic for what he does for business, but he said something a while ago that really impacted me. He said, a lot of business owners consume a lot of information oftentimes, and we live in kind of a world where there's just so much information out there. It's
Mhm.
easy to just consume it and it just goes right past you. Um, but he said, I'd rather have somebody instead of reading 5 books one time. He's like, I would rather read one book 5 times,
Yeah.
because when you go through a book, sometimes you just don't get all of it, especially if you're listening to it in the car or you're just kind of reading through it. But when you do get one of those, like you said, the E-Myth or Good to Great, or anything by Peter Drucker is fantastic. Like that's like a textbook, you know,
Yeah.
and so going through it and really studying it actually in many ways is more beneficial, I think, at least for me, because I don't know, my brain just can't like I can't comprehend everything the first time around, especially if it's got lots of stuff in it, right? And the
Yeah.
good ones always do. And so yeah, I love that you said that. Like revisiting a book, is like I think that's almost more important than just finding like that next great gem, you
Yeah,
know?
I totally agree. I mean, it sounds cool or whatever. Hey, I read 52 books in a year, but like if I were to do it again, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have found the gems and really sunk my teeth into them more because I ended up revisiting them anyway. Like I said, and unfortunately, in the business world, there is a lot of again kind of fluffy books out there that could all be one chapter if they wanted to be. Um, so there's definitely there's something there to that, and I've changed how I read a lot, not just with business books, but with everything of trying to read more deeply and being like, maybe I read 10 books in a year, but I like really read them, you know?
Yeah, yeah, kind of like like just allow it to sink in,
Mhm.
each chapter going through it a couple of different times.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, I agree with what
no,
you said.
it's there is something to that, just the way our brains work and absorb information. Because at the end of the day, when you read a business book, the reason you read it isn't for entertainment.
Hmm.
Um, it's actually so you can take the tactic that's in there and apply it in your business, and hopefully it will help you grow your business. And so
Yeah.
if that like if you're not fully comprehending the tactic, then why would you continue on? Like you should sit on that and let it, let it develop your brain or absorb and really move forward with it. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that's so true.
Especially because you may
Um,
not have, you may not have needed those tactics at that time. Like when I was reading the E Myth and it was me and one other teacher, eh, right? But then once I had 10 teachers, one paragraph that he says, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just like that one time when I, blah, 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 blah,
yeah.
like, or Peter Drucker stuff, or you can connect it to real life experiences much better.
Yep. Yep. So, okay, so you've got the business now. You're a partner. Um, so you were mainly teaching, it sounds like, and he was
Oh yeah.
running like the books and the admin and all that kind of thing. Is that sort of what the partnership was?
Yeah, it sort of ended up being so his corporate job was more in finance, so he did all the financials and stuff, which was really helpful for me. And then I did the teaching, and I said operations earlier, but it was some admin. I would say more like kind of people facing stuff. So anything that was kind of front of house or people facing, I tend to handle. He's kind of a classic like introverted financial guy, right? So he's stuck in the back room and did those things, and I handled talking to the customers, hiring the teachers, all of that fun stuff, which grew and grew over time, obviously. But um, yeah, he was kind of back of house. I was front of house. Think about it that way, maybe.
And was it a good partnership?
Yeah, it was. I was fortunate. We don't have any bad blood, or we don't nothing weird happened. Um, really just what happened is because we're not partners anymore. What happened honestly is just, I mean, this music business stuff is tough, right? The music school
Yeah.
business industry is not, if he was coming from a corporate job where, you can make a sizable amount of money. And not to say that's impossible in the music school world, or really any performing arts world. But it's a tougher go at the beginning, at least, right?
Yeah.
And being a business owner is challenging, as right? So eventually he's just like, hey, I have two kids. I can go get a job for 90K a year tomorrow. I'm going to go do that. Right. And I'm like, valid, dude, go for it. And because I think other two, he wanted to be a business, he wanted to kind of break out of the corporate grind, which I totally resonate with. But I'm not sure if he was super passionate about exactly what we were doing. Right. Like, I think he wanted to be a business owner more than he wanted to be a business owner of a music school, right? And that has its so then it's harder to make those challenges worth it. Not that I don't think he could have overcome those challenges. He's a very smart guy. But again, he had kids. I don't have any kids. So it was easy for me to live off of scraps where, and we were splitting the scraps. So he's just like, hey man,
Yeah.
I'm going to go uh, get a corporate job again, take care of my kids, and I think that's great. In some ways, I that lifestyle is sounds enticing sometimes when you're a business owner, right? Just to get your paycheck and clock in and clock out. We don't
Right.
really have that luxury. Um, but yeah, since I was so passionate about it, I was like, well, I'm going to keep going, man. Like this is my thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So he just basically, it sounds like it just wasn't profitable enough for him, or at least he didn't see the path forward that was going to make sense for him long term.
Exactly.
And so he handed it over to you. You took the reins. And about how many students did you have at that point?
Oh man, so we were kind of plateaued at that point, which I think was part of his decision. So I think we were right around maybe 150 or 200 or something like that, and we were having a really hard time breaking out of that plateau. So I think he even maybe thought that we were almost at capacity, like we grabbed the market that we could grab. And there's not a ton to give two really good salaries to or to give a really good salary to two owners at 200 students is obviously a challenge, right? For most markets, I would say. So yeah, we were stalled for a while, so I think that's kind of where he just capped off at. And I think that was a big part of it. If we would have gotten to some of the numbers that we're at now, I don't know if he would have stuck around or not. But
Yeah. Yeah. So you were plateaued. And by the way, were you in a commercial location, like a leased location?
yes.
Okay. Okay. And you obviously had room like you had more rooms, so you could have grown just from the capacity standpoint, but
Yeah.
with the marketing and the way things were structured, things weren't getting past that 150 to 200.
Yeah, we had space capacity, and we were booking new students, but it was just, the class, our churn was matching our
Right.
inflow. So we are
Right.
just, we are just kind of stuck there. And I hadn't really figured out how to think about that yet at the time. So, that's on me. But yeah, so we were just, and I think that around that number is where a lot of people kind of stall out from
Sure.
helping out with BAM. I hear all the time. So that was definitely us for, man, probably, I'll say 2 years, maybe.
Really? So 2
Yeah.
years you guys were at about that 150 200.
hmm
And so when he left, how did you manage that? Like, and how did you break past that?
So break past that plateau, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was really just buckling down on kind of the fundamentals, meaning, so you brought up Hormozy earlier. So Hormozy wasn't writing anything back then, I don't think. But I definitely wasn't engaging with it if he was. But yeah, he has a really good way of kind of breaking things down to the fundamentals. And I think that's what I kind of did. Not to as good of a degree, but ultimately I did realize I was like, well, we have an outflow and we have an inflow, right? If I can just tweak one of these, then we're fine. If I can tweak both, even better. So that's when I got really more serious about our numbers. Because I think since he was doing a lot of the numbers before, I kind of just trusted him, and not that he was doing a poor job, but I just was like, okay, cool, you got it. And then I was handling all the operations, like I said. But then now that the numbers are my responsibility and I was seeing them every month, and I was saying, okay, I booked 17 new students, but I lost 15. All right, I booked 11 new students, but I lost 12, right? And enough months of that in a row, I'm like, wait a second, there's the problem, you know?
Mm,
Um, so then focusing in on just inflow versus outflow, and then therefore thinking about my numbers and thinking about marketing, because marketing is the inflow, and obviously our retention and things like that is the outflow. So just zoning in on those, I think, is what got us past that for sure.
Interesting. So I love that inflow and outflow. You're right, because literally those are the
Whole game.
two levers that
Yep.
make the business work. And if you can change one of them,
Hmm.
then you will see an impact. And I love that because it's not just about marketing. It's not just about, oh, I just need to get more students. I just need to
Yep.
get more enrollments, all that. Retention is just as important
Yep.
as that. So I love that, the inflow and the outflow.
That's
Um,
really the fundament. Now, unfortunately, there's like 50 things that go into inflow and
yeah,
outflow, right?
of course.
But still, fundamentally, that's the whole game. And when I kind of realized that, and I didn't feel like I was shooting in the dark as much, that's when things started to change for us.
Sure, sure. And so, and that's how you broke past. That's how you broke past. So it was just
Mhm.
simply a shift of my. It's like a paradigm shift for you. It was
Yeah.
realizing that it really came down to those fundamentals and knowing your numbers. Um, so okay, so you're at the helm. You're running this thing. You figured out the inflow, the outflow. That needed to get tweaked. So you started tweaking it, and you
Mhm.
started seeing a difference.
Yep.
And from there, what happened? Like, did you see big growth? Was it just steady growth? What
I would say it was sort of. It wasn't a huge immediate jump, so we didn't double in a year or anything like that. I know some schools have done that. That wasn't me. But there were definitely spikes. So it wasn't just a slow but steady. I think what was kind of happening is we as a basis, it was slow but steady because again, I was just focusing on in versus out, and I just try to make sure that my in was higher than my out every month if I could. And but then also through marketing and stuff, I then was also able to take advantage of opportunities a little bit better. So, in this space, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, back to school is great, January is great. So those would kind of just float me along before, but then now I knew how to really take advantage of those. So I would have those big spikes, and then you couple that with having less outflow every month, that would kind of compound on itself. So maybe it was kind of slow but steady between those spikes, but each year I was able to make those spikes better and better, and then also make my slow but steady better and better, and then just kind of grow out from there. So
was
yeah, I
the
didn't double in a
company?
year or anything, but it took some time still.
Were you actually running ad campaigns at this point?
So we pretty much since the beginning were running Google ads,
Okay,
just because that just seemed to make the most sense to me, and I'm happy to get into why. So I taught all that myself to myself. Was I running them as well as I could have been? Definitely not. Now that I know way more,
sure,
but we're pretty much always doing that. But we weren't doing any sort of push or interruption marketing. Like we were never doing Facebook campaigns. We weren't doing flyers. We weren't doing sponsorships. Um, we just didn't really have what we thought was the cash flow for that, which to be honest, we didn't really. Again, at that 150, 200 student mark, it can be tough to have
it's
extra
very
cash for
tough.
that. Yeah. Now, but that was also maybe a mindset shift. It's just like, okay, well, if I spend $500 to make $2,000, that's okay. Um, right. I wasn't really thinking about that because, again, in our industry, as you know, David, like, yeah, you might make that $2,000, but it's over a year.
Right,
But eventually that scales. So I'm like, well, I'm down $500, and I wasn't good at thinking, well, yeah, you spend $500, but that's going to bring you 2,000. You should do a
right,
bunch of that. You know what I mean? Um,
right.
so
Did
we had
you?
very light marketing, very light campaigns going until I got serious.
Yeah. Did you? Was there a campaign that really hit it for you? Like something that when you when you ran it, you started to see that inflow tick up,
Yeah.
and that was like, hey, we need to do more of that, and it was successful for you.
Yeah, at the time it was very Google centered. So Google has changed a lot. And I'm happy to talk about that. So it used to be much more my bread and butter than it is now. But so we had really robust Google ads. But I think the big thing that we changed is we got a lot better at the offer creation and making a compelling offer and having something um, that excites people. Because I was always really focusing, and I can still be this way from time to time, as I think you've seen in coaching calls with me in the past before, David. Like I'm real good at the nerdy background stuff. But at the end of the day, like I can do all these fun metrics, but if they go to a landing page and it's just like, hey, we have lessons, like nobody cares, right? So once I started working more on our offer, and then also working on that back end, meaning, am I talking with teachers to make sure trial lessons are actually good? I hate to admit, but I had plenty of years where I'm like, Johnny's fine at trial lessons. And then later on, I'm like, no, he's not. What was I thinking? You know what I mean? Yeah, we changed a lot of our like trial offers, and that helped us a lot. Um, and eventually expanded that out into the meta world and all of that. It's well, Facebook at the time, but
Okay, interesting. So you started to learn how to write offers, and
basically, yeah,
yeah, and there's so much that can be learned in that world, when it comes to just the marketing world. And you talked about reading books. There's lots, and in fact, speaking of Hormozy, he has a whole book called Offers,
yeah, I go through it all the time. Yeah,
which is a fantastic book. Yeah,
talk about a book
yeah,
I've read
that's a
multiple
great book.
times. That's one.
So you started to put together offers then that were compelling to people, that actually people were like, "Hey, this is a good offer."
Yeah,
If they're ever interested in learning music or taking an instrument or whatever, this is the time to do it, because it's a compelling offer. Hormozy calls it a grand slam offer.
right.
Like, that means it's got to be so good, not just decent, but really, really good, to get people to think, man, I'd be crazy to say no to this. Like this, if I'm wanting to learn, this is the time to do it. So you started developing your skill and your ability at writing offers.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll even say too, like, I would love to tell you that I was creating Grand Slam offers. I was not. I was not. I was still wasn't there yet. I like to think I'm closer to that nowadays. But just the difference from essentially not having an offer, which I still see a lot of people in the industry doing, to having just a decent offer, like how you said, like
Yeah.
that turned the key for us so much. Like so, even just moving a couple steps in the right direction, even if it's not as good as it could have been, was really huge for us. And I think that's important for people to take away, because sometimes they think, all right, well, I am going to read that offers book 10 times. I'm going to make it absolutely perfect. And yeah, that should be a goal of yours, but that shouldn't stop you from acting, right? Like my offers were still not great. They were just better. But that was huge for us.
I love that. One of my another guy that I really admire is Stu McLaren,
Mm.
and he says it doesn't have to be perfect; it just has to get going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's that I love that, because so many people, they just have paralysis of analysis. I'm not good enough, or that imposter syndrome. But like you say, you just got to do a little bit better,
Yep.
and just improve. It doesn't have to be perfect. So
And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because we're talking about these Grand Slam offers, and that should be the goal. But I think I don't want people to think that I grew only once I figured out Grand Slam offers, because that was not the case, right? I just was better at them, and that helped a lot.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So on the other side of the spectrum,
Yeah.
what about absolutely bombing a marketing campaign, or
Ooh.
trying something that just totally, burned cash? Is there an example of something like that?
Yeah, I've had a couple of those. Let me try to think of a good one. Um, I will say we did have we've definitely experimented, and oftentimes to our disbenefit, with like extended trial periods before. And not that I don't think that can work, but I think we did them the wrong way. So we essentially took like the price of what a trial lesson would be, and we just extended that out. Thinking like, oh well, if people are interested in one lesson at this price, surely they're interested in three lessons at this price. And boy, are they. But what ends up happening is, this kind of Groupon effect. I almost hate to say that, but that's what most people call it. It's just okay, but some guys just like, okay, well, I can get three lessons for $20. I'm just going to take those three lessons and then get out of here. Um, I've had plenty of examples of that. So if you want to make a grand slam offer, it's a balancing act, because you can take anything and just make it as cheap as humanly possible and get people to react to it. But we've had plenty where I made it too good of a deal, and then they just basically use up that deal and then they're gone, and it doesn't pan out financially very well. I would say.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that is a real thing. I know we experimented with Groupon and Living Social, and
Yeah,
that was definitely a fad that was a pretty big deal for a time. But you have to think about the types of people you're attracting to your business.
exactly.
and how you, because you're with music lessons, it's actually a relationship that you're starting with people, right?
Mhm.
And so you want to make sure that this relationship is with somebody that will respect you and your policies, and be willing to pay you money.
Yeah.
um so that that totally makes sense. So did you like did you have any like low to no money marketing strategies where it was like, hey, we're doing Google, that's great, but we need to like widen the net and get a little bit more aggressive with our marketing strategies?
Yeah, I think the number one opportunity that people aren't taking as much advantage of as they should be is their current customer base and their email list, right?
Mm,
Um, I know a lot of schools who aren't taking advantage of that either because A, they're not building that up, which is it's the first mistake, or B, I always hear, well, I don't like to get a bunch of spam email. Nobody likes to get emails, right? I hate emails. Um, but if you're building up an email list, especially if they're from people who have reached out to you before, right? So we all have the families who they reach out, they're interested in lessons, and then you just never hear from them again, right? Well, they reached out to you so they're interested in some way, right? So I think if the most effective, no cost or little money is just reaching back out to those people, whether it's through a really sophisticated email campaign or it's just you have a Google Sheet and you're just picking up the phone. Um, yeah, it's going to be some time, and maybe you only get one or two customers here and there from it, but those are one or two customers that you spent a, maybe you've already spent the money on, right? Or B, you haven't spent any money on and you're not going to spend any additional money on. I think that's the number one when I've talked to schools. People are just letting that email list collect dust. And I'm not saying spam people, but hey, back to school's here, do a back to school offer. And if three people jump on, that's three people that you didn't have before and you had to send an email. Like that's very worth it, I think.
right. Sending email doesn't cost any money.
Yeah, no money, and also there's none of the most of the time there's not going to be that sophistication, Meta or Google. There's going to be a learning curve of how to use the platform. Like you can send an email or you can pick up the phone. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's huge. You think you do that a couple times a year, you get even just 10 to 20 new students. Take your lifetime value on that. Like you might have made tens of thousands of dollars off of those emails and phone calls.
And
You should do
do
that.
do you think that people sometimes get hung up with this idea of like, well, if I can't automate everything and have a software that all I got to do is plug it in and it just does everything for me, like I feel like sometimes people can kind of get tripped up on that. Like, well,
Mm,
you've got 100 students, right? Or maybe your list is like 150 names. It's like you could literally just pick up the phone and call those people in an afternoon, or
yeah.
maybe a couple of days,
Mhm.
or send text messages, or like you say, emails, or just all of the above. Do you feel like sometimes people get tripped up with that? Like I don't have a software that can do it, or I don't know how to use the software that'll do it, so I'm just not going to do it.
I do, yeah. I do think people get really hung up on that. I think that's a huge mistake, and I don't want to sound like an old man or anything, but yeah, I think sometimes you have to know what phase of your business journey you're in, and sometimes you're in the phase of just like you just got to eat rocks, like you just got to do it. Um, so we all, and this is kind of related, but we always hear you should be working on your business and not in your business, and you and I know that's 100% true, and that should always be your goal, absolutely. But if you're at 100 students, like you're going to be working in your business. Like that's just
Right.
the fact of the matter. And I think sometimes people, yeah, if they don't have that perfect solution, whether it's they don't have the staff, they don't have the software, like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta do it. And, again, I'm not trying to sound like a boomer or anything, but you just gotta put in the work sometimes so that you can get to that point. Like, yeah, to be honest, like I don't send the emails anymore. I have staff do that, right?
Right.
But I was definitely the one doing it for years. So,
Well, and I remember talking to my manager about this same thing, like, because I went through that same mindset thing, like, well,
mhm,
I don't want to be doing this every single week or month or whatever.
yeah,
But we had this conversation, and she was like, well, if you can just create the system for me, and then I can run it for you. But she's like, if you just give it to me and you just tell me you want these emails sent out and whatever without any kind of a structure or a system, then I don't really know. So that was actually really clarifying for me when she kind of told me that, because it was like, oh, all I have to do is create the system and run it and do it myself.
Hmm.
at the onset, like at the beginning, and then hand it over. At some point, when your school gets big enough, then yes, you can hire somebody, staff somebody to do all of that for you. But until you get to that point, you gotta create the system first and create a process that actually works.
Yeah,
And
totally agree.
the truth is nobody cares about your business as much as you do.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely a lesson I learned the hard way too many times that I'm willing to admit. Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. So, and it sucks because we want to be the business owner, as quickly as we can. And again, it's good to have that mindset and have that goal so that you're not stuck, in your business forever. Because you and I have seen that before as well.
yeah.
But there is kind of this path to that you have to kind of accept, I think, unfortunately. And it sucks. It sucks real bad, but it's worth it.
So, kind of coming back to the money stuff, because I think this is another area where people, um, I know it can be a harsh reality when you look at the bank balance or you look at the inflow, like you said, the inflow versus the money going out.
Mhm.
Um, were there some times near the early days when you first took over the business where you were like, I don't know how I'm going to grow this, or I don't know if we're going to even make it, or like were there moments like that where you were now faced with being fully in charge of the money and realizing that you were going to have to balance this budget?
Oh, absolutely, man. So yeah, I definitely don't want to paint the picture that it was all sunshine and roses. Like I figured it out. I read those books and then it was great. Like I've definitely had a couple scary months. The first, obviously, COVID was a big one. And that's going to be true for
Yeah.
everybody. So I won't even really belabor that point. We all know. But I'll be honest. Even when we were on a growth, so we were on a growth stage, kind of that's slow and steady. Um, and actually, what maybe this would be interesting for people when we started doing better. I actually made some mistakes that then got us in a worse place. So as we started, so it was almost easier when we're really scrappy, it was easy for me to also be scrappy, right? But
Mm,
then as we were kind of growing over those couple years that we were talking about earlier, there was actually some money in the account, and we had some, and I wanted to go into a really aggressive growth phase, and I really invested in systems and people and like all these things. And it took a while for that investment to pay off. And in fact, I even had to kind of like shave off everything that I was doing. Um, so I went too hard because I guess I can't really imagine what I was thinking at the time, but I was just like, well, I've made this work before with no money. Surely I can make this work with some money, right? And I just went. I was a little reckless, if I'm being honest. Looking back,
mm,
it made total sense to me at the time. But yes, I'm talking this. I mean, this was probably, I don't know, 3 years ago or something. So not
yeah.
nothing too, not the beginning scrappy days. But yeah, so I've definitely had plenty of those experiences where I had to kind of learn how to manage those things better and focus on the timelines of things.
How do you manage that? Because it's like, I think as an entrepreneur, we have this eternal optimism that
Yeah,
things will work out, that, oh, we'll just grow a little bit more and it'll pay for itself. Or, right? Like there's just something about an entrepreneur. I think it's a wonderful thing.
hmm,
Um, but there's just this optimism that things will work out and that will grow. And there comes a point where, in an entrepreneur's life where it's like they have to face the harsh reality of there is actually a hard line. Like this is how much came in and this is how much is going out,
right.
and like you have to face that. And I've found that a lot of entrepreneurs don't like facing that because they're always looking to the future, they're always thinking about the opportunities and how this is going to just make so much more money and whatever. So how do you balance that as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it was two things at least that come to mind. So, firstly, yeah, I totally agree with you. I am 100% like it's gonna be fine type dude. And again, I think coming from a more scrappy background, like I'm very happy that I have that background, but that sometimes reinforces that even more. Like I said, so yeah, so I think it's probably two things. So it's unfortunately an even deeper dive into numbers. And I only say unfortunately because that's something that tends not to enthuse a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially in our industry where we're all creatives at the end of the day and nobody wants to sit and look at a spreadsheet. I get it, right? But so I knew my numbers pretty well, but there were some numbers I wasn't even looking at. So like a big one for me was like a payback period. I never even thought about payback right? I just went, I will spend this and I'll get back that at some point. So it's fine, right?
Mm.
But if you stack enough of those on top of each other and the payback period for each of those is a year and you have 10 of those going at once, then you have a couple really lean months or negative months, you
So when
know?
you say payback period, do you mean like debts, like acquiring debt to buy something and then the payback period of that debt? Is that what you mean?
It can be, or it can even be like marketing is a great example. So, like talking more about numbers. So I'm really focused on what's called ROAS a lot, ROAS, return on ad spend. And if my ROAS is like a 4 to 1, and just for anybody who's listening and doesn't know, so basically what that means is for every dollar of marketing that I spend, I make back $4, right? So if
Right.
I am advertising something and I run $500 on a campaign and I get back enough students that that's going to make me $2,000, then that's a 4 to 1, right? So that sounds great. Let's do, if we have a machine that we can put a dollar into and it gives us back $4, we should put as many of those dollars in as we can, for sure.
Right.
But where payback period gets important with that, especially in our industry, is people aren't giving us those $2,000 immediately. So
Right.
if I'm marketing at these really high numbers, a really high percentage of our gross profit or our revenue or however you do it, and I don't get that back for 8 months again, and you do that every month, then that can really stack up. So again, if there's infinite money, then we would be totally fine because we'd make that money back. But cash flow is a very real thing. And yeah, like you said, debts or like instruments is a great thing. We really push our group classes, and it's just like, sweet, I'll spend $12,000 on keyboards. Who cares? I'll make it back. How quickly are you going to make it back, Mike? you know.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a big thing. So going really deep into the numbers and even thinking about numbers that maybe you hadn't thought of before. In my case, payback period was a huge
So
one.
you've talked about like um you haven't said this phrase, but you're referencing lifetime customer value,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Which is a super important metric that everybody should know in their school. But like, I think it's also something that's very sometimes it's a little confusing to know how to calculate it. I've
Sure.
had this conversation so many times. Like, how do you calculate lifetime customer value? So, what what's your approach to this? You mentioned student comes in and that's whether it's $1,500 or $2,000. But somebody listening might think, well, but wait a minute, I only charge like $150 for my tuition or $200 for my tuition. So why would I assume that that person student signing up, I'm going to make 1,500 or $2,000 off of that student?
Yep.
Because I don't know if they're going to stay for 10 months or 20 months or 5 years. Some people have students that stick with them for 10 years. Some of them they quit after 30 days. So
Mhm.
how do you manage that and have a reliable figure that you can kind of go off of?
Yeah, so and there are a couple ways to do it. So I'll talk to you about the way that I do it, and there's plenty of other people smarter than me who might do it slightly differently. But first off, I think an important thing to note is yeah, at the end of the day, you are playing with averages here, and that can be another thing that can get people in trouble because you said, well, I don't know if this person's going to stick for 10 months or 24 months. What I'm about to talk about is, well, I just run the averages in my school so that I can kind of safely make a bet on that, right? But that's where a lot of other things I see people get in trouble would be. So if, hey, historically people stick with us for 5 years. Cool. Was that when only you were teaching? Because that might be really different now that you have other teachers, right? So going back to your numbers, because then if you have a teacher who's maybe not keeping students as long, then that if you're assuming one average and a different average is happening, then that's bad, right? So I just want to say that first. So, but again, we're focusing on averages here. So the way that I calculate it is I will take the churn monthly of a particular time period. Normally, I like to go by like 12 months or so because summer is going to be worse and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I like to do 12 months, but sometimes I'll do less. And then with that number, you can figure out the average amount of time that somebody is going to be sticking with you. So I'll even just say it here. I'm sure people are going to be listening to this, so maybe they can take notes later. But if you take what your monthly churn is as a percentage, you put that as the denominator of the number one. So if your churn is 5%, meaning that 5% of your students are leaving on average every month, and you take one and you divide that point by 0.05, which is 5% as a decimal, you'll get the number 20. So that's the number of months that on average people will stick around based on your churn. And
Yep.
we can talk about how to find churn as well too. But once I do that, then you have two options. People will then take what they charge per month and multiply it by 20 in this case. Or what I prefer to do is I take my gross profit and then multiply it by that, just because that's a little bit more conservative. So if you're charging $150 for monthly lessons, but after you pay your teacher, maybe you pay your teachers $50 in order to make that happen. My profit's 100. I'll multiply that by 20, and then I go, okay, I can comfortably assume that 20 somebody will stick with me for 20 months. I'll make $100 per month on that. That's $2,000, right? And then I just play the game from there, basically.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. That's the same way that I calculated it too. What I like about that strategy is you can do the same thing not just for your whole school, but then you
Hmm.
can subcategorize and say teacher A has a an average value, lifetime value in their students of, let's say it's 15 months. Teacher
Hmm.
B, they have an average lifetime value of 30 months, right? And so you can actually determine which teachers are more profitable for the business than others. And of
Exactly.
course, there's variables and stuff within that, but that is a very helpful thing to know. And so, yeah, no, and the other thing I like about this calculation, Mike, is that I mean, yeah, you talk about denominators and percentages. It sounds a little bit complicated on the one hand, but it's really actually a very simple way to
Hmm.
calculate your student retention and ultimately your lifetime customer value.
Absolutely.
Um, I just think that's fantastic, and it makes a lot of sense. So when did you start kind of realizing that and utilizing that in your school?
So when it came to this was probably when it came to marketing, because again, I wanted to really see. This was even before that phase I said where I got a little bit too aggressive, but I knew that so again, when I market, I know that I spend X per month, right? And you see that going out. And sometimes you see more coming back in the next month and you're like, sweet. And sometimes you don't. And you're like, well, why is that happening? Right. So
Right.
I started to really kind of take myself to school on how that works, going back to this payback period thing that we were talking about earlier, and just really calculating that out. Now, again, I went too hard on that later on because I said, sweet, if every dollar I spend, I make back four, let's empty the bank account. I didn't really do that, but I might as well have. You know what I mean? um, there's other things there. But yeah, so I think marketing is what kind of helped me see that, because once you start marketing a lot more, as you know, like those bills add up, right? If you're spending multiple thousands of dollars a month that you didn't used to be spending, you want to make sure that it's worth it for you to be spending that. So I felt like I was getting my return, but I didn't want to spend thousands of dollars on a feeling, you know.
Yeah. So, okay, so you started to get serious about your numbers, to
Hmm.
know your numbers. You got serious about your marketing.
Hmm.
And then that's when things started to grow for you guys. So what was it like after you kind of, again, you were running the business on your own, you didn't have the partner anymore, and things were starting to grow. Obviously you needed to hire teachers at that point.
Hmm.
There came a point, I'm assuming, where you were like, oh, we actually have inflow now that's outpacing the outflow, and now we need more teachers to handle our increased capacity.
Hmm.
So what was your pro, like, had you ever hired a teacher before? Did you come up with a system or what?
Yeah, so we had hired some teachers when my partner was still at the school, and man, we I think it's because he was from a corporate background. We had such a formalized process for hiring, which looking back is like kind of laughable. It was insane what we did. So we don't do that anymore, and now I mean I'm hiring quite a lot. And I'm still at least the first point for hiring. That's something I haven't delegated. I need to delegate that if I'm being honest. So our process has changed quite a bit, I would say, over the years. Um, and were you asking about that process, or you just?
Yeah, I was just curious, like what were some of the early, I don't know, maybe mistakes or challenges that you
Mm,
faced when you were, when it was kind of only up to you, and
yeah,
you were trying, yeah, like you said, it was kind of over formalized at first. So how did
sure.
it change and why?
The number one thing, and I've said this before with folks, my number one recommendation when it comes to hiring in general, at least for me, and this comes from a lot of the mistakes that I made. I have a pretty good sense for people, but everybody's going to be amazing for 6 weeks. Um, So what I've learned, and again, maybe I just don't have as good of a sense for people as I thought. What do I know? But I've really learned that part of the hiring process needs to sort of be extended in some way with like a probationary period or a shadowing period, or at least how we do it. Only because a lot of the early mistakes was like, oh yeah, this guy seems awesome, and you hire them, and then 2 months goes by, and then it's terrible with our industry because 2 months goes by, and you realize, oof, this person isn't the right fit. And I'll admit, there's probably been a couple times where maybe I saw a red flag that I decided to ignore. I didn't fire fast enough. That's definitely happened as well. But then 2 months goes by, and you're like, I think I need to get rid of this person. But they have 12 students, and 8 of those students love this person because they might be an amazing teacher, but they're just a poor employee, right?
Mm.
I've had that conversation more times than I'm probably willing to admit, David. But so for me, I think the biggest mistake I made is bringing people on and giving them their own students too quickly without really giving them some time to really show me who they really are, as opposed to who they are as an interviewee or brand spanking new teacher. Because for a lot of people, that's different, unfortunately.
Interesting. So how do you do that then? How do you, I mean, because obviously when you hire somebody, you need them to, you've got students that are needing a teacher. So how do you do that onboarding process?
Yeah, I have to delay some of that, and I actually think that it pays off for us overall because the churn of having teachers come in and out is just brutal, right? Even if we have a bit of a waiting list, of course it's tempting to just get somebody in and get those people students, but we try to go through at least a couple weeks of first off they go through they do 2 interviews with me. So one is me telling them about us, and I tell them, hey, we do things a little bit differently. In Ohio, a lot of people are more traditional and we're not. So I was like, hey, just see if there's any deal breakers in here. And they seem to appreciate that. Then we do a more formal interview. Then I do some training with them, either myself or a staff member. And that just gives me an opportunity. You'd be surprised how many people are like late to like the first day of training. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, like if you're late on the first day of training, how are you going to be in 6 months to your first lesson of the day?
Right. Yeah.
Probably late, So we have that training, and then we have them shadow teachers, whom I already trust and know, and I'll check in with those teachers because I've had applicants who, I've had the teacher tell me, oh yeah, they came in and they sat in the lesson and they were texting the whole time. They weren't engaging with the student. They weren't listening to
Mm.
me. Cool, red flag. Let's not move on, right? And then after the shadow for a bit, they kind of do almost like how in like public schools, how there's like a student teaching thing. I'll have my teacher, my kind of vetted teacher teach for 20 minutes, then I'll have the other teacher teach for the last 10, and then that vetted teacher will kind of report back to me. And yeah, and then we'll even sometimes with marketing, we'll have sort of like trial periods where people can have deals on maybe 8 weeks of lessons. So at a lower rate with this new teacher, just so I can say, hey, if I give you your own students, are you going to show up on time? Are you going to be professional? Are you going to send lesson notes? Are you going to do all these things that we require our teachers to do? And if the answer is no to any of those, then most of the time, I know that's not going to be a fit. So I am delaying it, which is brutal, I'll be honest. But I think it's so much more worth it long term.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's a really cool. So how since you started doing this, what have you found to be the case? Like teachers are obviously staying longer, I'm guessing, and they have better quality.
Yeah, definitely better quality teachers, I would say. And not, I think you know me well enough. Like I'm not a bloodthirsty, heartless type of boss, right? Like I want to give people a chance. But I would say, man, at least 25-30% of the people who we put through that process end up not making it out of that process, which is just for anybody, like I'm still paying them for that time. Like they're employees at that point we're training them, where they're being paid. So it is money that I'm losing. But the headaches and the pain and the reputation and everything that goes along with the 30% of teachers who, if I would have just hired them before and then they would have gotten 25 students and then been a problem, I'm so glad that they were able to kind of maybe show their true colors before then. You know what I mean? So it's brought me a lot more peace of mind, I would say. The teachers I have, I know I can trust, and I know they've been vetted. Of course, weird things still happen, but
Yeah. One of the questions I often get is how do you find teachers like
mm,
that especially with a more rigorous onboarding process, and you're delaying it, and you're even weeding people out along the way.
mhm.
That means that you need to be looking even more places and finding more options. So somebody might be thinking, well, that's great, Mike, for you. You must have just this wellspring of all these teachers that are coming to you from all over the place. So how do you find them?
Yeah, I do not have a wellspring. I wish I did. That'd be great. That would really make my life easier. So I think when it comes to that, and I hope this is still helpful, I do pretty traditional things. I mean, I'm most of it is Indeed, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
Now, and I am also I'm in I'm in Ohio, and I'm not in Cleveland or Cincinnati, so like it's not the most populous or crazy or admittedly competitive area. So I am lucky with that regard. What I think has been helpful is less about the format and more about almost thinking about that as marketing as well. Right? We talked about offers before when it came to getting new students. I think that's also true with teachers and employees in general. Because if, yeah, people are just looking for jobs, but if you can really paint the picture of what type of company you are and why they should want to work for you, I think that's actually been more helpful than because I have tried all the other avenues and the Facebooks and the Indeed competitors. I don't even remember what some of the ZipRecruiter and all that fun stuff. But at the end of the day, I think I spend most of my time in like, well, how can I grab the right type of people for me? And if they're the right type of people, then what I'm talking about in the job listing is going to attract them. And if it doesn't attract them, no big deal, right? So part of that is some things that we do differently, and probably just a bigger part of that is taking that time rather than just going like music teacher wants it. I'm trying to really show people who we are and why they should want what are the benefits of being with me as opposed to somewhere else. And that's been really helpful to me. So not as tactical of an answer as maybe you would have hoped, but I think that's still really helpful.
No, and I think it matters, like when you're like, because I remember interviewing a lot of teachers, and sometimes teachers would just simply choose not to go with us because
Yeah.
they didn't necessarily agree with our policies or
Hmm.
whatever. But then on the flip side of it, it was, we had some teachers where it's like they had job offers elsewhere, but they chose, even for lower pay, by the way,
Yeah.
to teach for us because they loved our culture and they loved what we were doing.
I'm in the same
So
boat. Yeah.
I think that really matters a lot, the impression that you give people.
Right.
Um, so with the pay, are you competitive? Like, do you start them off at a certain rate when they're kind of in the introductory phase and then raise it, or how do you do pay?
Yeah, kind of yes to all the above. So our biggest sort of competitive advantage, I would say, and this isn't for everybody, both for teachers of mine or potential teachers of mine, as well as maybe for other schools. Our starting pay is competitive, but there's certainly people that pay higher than us. What we really advertise for ourselves is we want to try to give people stability. So what that means is we don't do like a you're paid per lesson, and then oh it's confusing when if little Timmy doesn't show up, am I still getting paid? But then I got to make up. Am I doing the makeup for free? Like that whole mess that a lot of people go through, right? So first off, my teachers are W-2 employees, which for Ohio is pretty rare. I know in like California, for example, that's I think a requirement, and in some other places, right? But in Ohio, we bring them on as actual employees, which is more cost to me again as well. But my teachers actually work on shifts. And in fact, I think I actually originally got this idea from the great Michael Hemsworth, who we spoke to, right? But when they come on board, they have their schedule that they're teaching. But if somebody cancels, they're still getting paid. If there's gaps, then they're still getting paid. And then they just have expectations of what they're doing there. And then if they teach on Thursdays if they teach every Thursday for 4 hours, and Thanksgiving comes around and we're off, I make the same amount of money. I charge my students monthly, so they still get paid for those 4 hours. So that's kind of our big, I want to say. So when you ask, is it they get paid more or do they get paid less? It really works out to be more. Now sometimes I need to do a better job of expressing that to people. The hourly rate is less, but first off, we cover a lot of taxes for them as employees, and then secondly, we give them that stability where I'm honestly eating cost a lot just to make sure that they have their set hours that they can rely on, which for our industry can be really huge for some people. And there are people who go, no, I just want to make $60 an hour and teach out of my basement. Sweet, man, great. But the people who come to us, they want the stability, and they want I can pretty much guarantee that I'm going to have this number of hours on my paycheck every week or every 2 weeks.
Interesting. So you actually pay them just as hourly employees
Yeah, they
for
clock in and
a
clock out.
shift.
Yeah, they
Do
clock in and
you
clock out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And obviously the biggest challenge that I'm sure you have with this is getting them started, right? So,
Mhm.
teacher Sally has one student and yet you're paying her for what, 3, 4 hours on a shift, or how do you break that down?
Yeah, we scale it up. So if they're eventually going to do 15 hours, as much as I'd like to, I'm not paying them for 15 hours when they only have one student, right?
Right.
But we will kind of with shifts, we are able to kind of pad that. So okay, maybe you only have two students, you're in for an hour. You're going to be in for 2 hours, and here's going to be some other stuff that you're going to do for that other hour, just to make your drive time more worth it. And then I'm going to work like crazy to get you those other hours filled, right? I also think a kind of side benefit, and I'll be honest, as much as I'm talking about numbers, I still need to crunch the numbers on how true this is. But what's nice about this is I don't have to be, it's a little bit easier for me to grow, I think, because yes, I might have to eat costs from time to time, but say I have a teacher who's starting at 4 and somebody else wants to come in at 2:30 or whatever. Oftentimes in the past, I wouldn't have booked that 2:30 student because that teacher wouldn't have wanted to sit around for an hour and do nothing and not be paid, right?
Mm,
So but now I can book that 2:30, and yeah, maybe I have to eat that hour cost, but it's still profitable, even if it's less profitable. And now I have that 3 and 3:30 that I'm going to try to fill for them, but I have a happier teacher, and I have a more locked in teacher, and I have more available time frames for new students. So when new students go to either whether it's self booking through Opus or it's calling us or whatever the case may be, we don't have to be as worried about being like, well, they're done at 5:30. I can only give you a 5:30 spot. I'll give them a 6:30 spot, and then that overall, even though I'm eating cost, it helps me get more students in more quickly.
yeah. Wow, that is a unique approach for sure. And I think the biggest challenge that I probably would have had with it would just be like, how do I get teachers started? But to your point, it's like,
Yeah.
well, we'll grow into it just the same way you would grow into it with, a teacher just paying, where you're just paying them per student.
Hmm.
As long as the teacher is okay with that,
Right.
and has the belief and the faith that you're going to be able to build out their schedule from the start. Did you start this way? Is this how you always had it?
Not at all. We were very traditional, very, hey, you get paid per lesson. Here's the pay per lesson type of situation. But again, I wanted a competitive advantage for my teachers. And
Yeah.
again, I got really sick of, I think the other kind of writing on the wall that I've been seeing more and more is, and this has always been the case, but I think it's even more so the case now. Is there's one thing that's stopping kids from music lessons right now? It's their schedule, right? So I just need to have some sort of, if somebody can only do 5:30, but a teacher doesn't want to do 5:30 because that means they have an hour gap they're not getting paid for. Over the long term, it makes me more money to book that 5:30, even if I have to eat that hour for a couple weeks, right? So that teacher stability and that availability, being able to book more lessons has just been really overall really impactful for us.
So it gives you a lot more flexibility to book on the schedule because you have these people that are literally just available,
Yep.
and you're paying them.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, no, that is really interesting. I didn't know that
Yeah.
you paid that way, Mike. So I guess the $1 million question is, what is your payroll percentage? So now that you've done this strategy, and so you have your gross revenue that comes in. What is your teacher pay percentage that
Yeah. So it is
comes out
higher
of that?
than a lot of folks because of that. But then the top line. So let me pull up the most recent numbers. Actually, hang on, so I can give
Yeah.
you an exact thing.
Yeah, that's one of those things. I think it's always a challenge because the biggest line item on your budget is your payroll,
Yeah.
and so
Absolutely.
it's the thing that we have to watch, you know,
Yeah.
the most closely. But of course, if it's a little high, then it's like, okay, well, you have to make it up somewhere else, right?
Exactly. So
Um,
yeah, our it's about 56%, I would say.
okay,
Which does put it's higher than I'd want it to be.
sure.
But again, it just comes down to working those numbers. So for me, it's almost less about that 56%, though that is something that I'm looking at. But it is that dollar amount extrapolated over the lifetime value is still profitable for me, right? So, and again, if I'm working on the assumption that this style of doing it is helping me get to those numbers, then it's worth it for me.
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. No, and I think you're doing something that not as many, like very few music school owners, I think, pay their pay their staff this way, but
Mm.
I think there's actually a lot of wisdom to it, and I think it's really cool. So, can you talk about like some of the scary decisions that you've had to make in your
Mm.
business during maybe the first couple years, or even the most, last couple years, whatever? But just in general, like as a business owner, we have to sometimes make really scary decisions. I'll give you an example. So for us, I think one of the first things that we did was we were running the music school out of our house for a long time, like for years, like 10 years, I think it was.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And we had like hundreds of students. It was kind of it was a circus actually. But then we finally got to a point to where we signed our first commercial lease. So for our journey, it was like the commercial lease was like we were now on the map. We're like official. And but up to that point, I didn't pay anything. Like
Mhm.
it was literally at our house. We
Yeah.
just happened to be in a position where we had enough property where we could, and had a couple outbuildings on the property. We were able to turn those into studios, and it was great. But when I signed my commercial lease, it's like now I'm on the hook for like 5 grand a month, and
Mhm.
it's like that's a new expense that I did not have before. I didn't increase my revenue. I just simply now I got to pay this money. That was a really scary thing because I was signing like a 5 year lease. And so it really lit a fire under me, and it was a scary thing. So are there were there some defining moments for you that were really, really kind of scary moments in your business?
Yeah, definitely the commercial lease stuff that you talked about. Now, we were commercial lease pretty much from the jump, but we were kind of lucky that we kind of rented like one room, and then we kind of had like right of first refusal on other rooms, and it was like this weird, like
Oh,
scary
okay.
office basement dungeon. It was terrible. So luckily, our it wasn't that. I think we were paying like $200 for this room or something like that at the beginning, and then
Wow.
eventually went to two rooms. But eventually, we did outgrow that. So just like how you said, even though we started commercial at a commercial location, there was those jumps of, okay, well, we need a new location, and just like you said, it's like, well, I'm not necessarily making any more money, but my expenses are about to go up a lot. So we jumped to like the downtown, like it's a really great spot. But jumping from scary dungeon basements and paying scary dungeon basement prices to pedestrian pedestrian walkway, pedestrian mall prices was definitely scary for sure. Um, I think other ones that come to mind actually is investments in people, which I'm very happy
Mhm.
to invest in people. I'm a big people guy, but that's another situation of, okay, I think this person's ready to take on more of a maybe a managerial role, or just some sort of more involved role in the company, and that maybe that involves, hey, a full time salary, right? Now, we were more prepped for this because we do shifts than maybe some other schools would be, because I kind of look at the numbers that way, uh, intrinsically because of that. However, if it's like, even I remember even the first one, I'll be honest. I mean, the first person was like, I think like 45K or something like that, which isn't a crazy amount of money. It's funny, it's over that 30K number that we were talking about before that I wanted for myself. Um, but man, just being like, okay, we're going to invest, and I do believe that this person is going to help us make that back. Um, but that's not guaranteed, and we don't know. And what if they don't do a good job, or what if I don't do good enough job of communicating what the expectations are? And it's way harder to take money back than it is to give it. So I don't want to have that conversation. And that's happened a couple times where we've kind of elevated people in the company or brought people on from the outside. And yeah, that's a big chunk of change to make sure you're getting a payment back on. It can be scary.
Yeah, I think it is too. I would agree with that. Like especially when you talk about management positions, because you have to pay them well. You have to
Yeah.
Those people are so critical to the
Mhm.
operations of your business, and they're important people in the business, but they have to be paid
You
well.
get
And
what you pay for.
I
I've
so
learned. Yeah, you get what you pay for.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's almost disproportionate, right? So like if you
yeah.
get the right people and you pay them a little more than what they might be able to get somewhere else, it's the returns are disproportionate. Like you get way more
Mhm.
than the extra maybe 10,000 or 5,000 a year that you're paying them.
Yeah.
And so that's what I found, at least. And because getting the right people is everything.
Yeah, I learned
That
that
is
the hard
everything.
way, for sure. Trying to save a bit here and there on a position like that, especially if you think this is gonna be an A+ player. I've lost people that mean, who knows what would have happened, but I've lost people or didn't hire people didn't accept offers or whatever because I was maybe just being cheap, to be honest, right? We're just like you said, now I've learned if I really think somebody's an A plus and they want 10 grand more a year, 5 grand more a year, that's a no brainer. You know what I mean? Absolute no brainer. It's still scary to your original question, of course, because you don't know. But yeah, I totally agree with what you said.
So on the flip side, so we talked about some of the scariest things. Well, were there any like real breakthroughs for you? Like, aha, I figured this out, or I unlocked this thing,
Mm.
where maybe it was, hey, we've got this great system for hiring now, or for paying our staff, or maybe, now we're not just relying on Google Ads, we're spreading out, all the different channels. Um, or maybe it was curriculum related. I don't know, but
Mm.
is there anything that you can think of that that works kind of like an aha thing, moment for you, or a paradigm shift along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, for me at least, in the way that I run my school, there's been a lot of really helpful things that have improved us. I think if there's been a paradigm shift, it goes back to, again, what are my numbers, what's my inflow versus my outflow, how can I influence those numbers, right? And then what can I do, what can I put in to get X out, and how can I do this to improve that? So I think just seeing it that way was the biggest aha, which again was a little bit earlier on, and it took us a while to still get to where we're at right now. um, but that was, if anything, was just for the clarity, because a lot of times I think you'd go, okay, well, I think things are going all right, but once you project those numbers out, you can see like, oh well, I'm going to cap at 250 if I keep doing what I'm doing. Or if you project the numbers out and go, oh, I'll cap at 500 if I keep doing what I'm doing. Sometimes just knowing like, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, what's going to happen, right? Rather than getting run around in all different directions. You know what I mean? So that was the big thing for me, is just, what are the project what are my projections based on my numbers? I think maybe put even better. Because
Yeah,
sometimes I've also learned to be like, cool, Mike, just let it sit. It's going up and to the right. Let it keep going up and to the right. That's okay. You know what I mean? You don't have to change. You don't have to change everything again. You know?
yeah. Going back, talking to younger Mike,
Hmm.
um, if you could relive those first 2 to 3 years of being the guy taking over the reins, um, is there a piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Definitely be focusing on those numbers again, and not to sound like a broken record.
Sure. Yeah.
I do think something that I've learned over the years, though, that I would definitely tell my younger self would hate to hear it, because my current self hates to hear it, just with the type of guy that I am, is you got to pick one or two things to do, rather than 100.
Mm,
I'm definitely a sufferer of shiny object syndrome. I think the entrepreneur mindset that you mentioned earlier is very susceptible to that. I think we are all in that boat, and especially as people in, the creative business as well. But as soon as, and I still learn this lesson sometimes. And some person on my staff, it's kind of a joke that part of her job is to go, Mike, not right now. Because I'll be like, what if we're a bookstore too? And she's like, Mike, you know what I mean? You know? So I have to remind myself of that lesson. But anytime that I sit down and go, okay, I have my list of ideas. That's not going anywhere. It's still on a list, but I'm going to focus on these two things right now. I've always been better for it. I hate to say that because I wish I could just do the 100 things, David, but that's not the truth, unfortunately.
no, that's super good advice, man. I'm right there with you. I you know, same thing. Yeah, bookstore, coffee shop, whatever. Like we could be five different businesses in one. It'd be, imagine
Yeah,
that.
right. Why
But
not?
yeah, yeah. And okay, so to kind of summarize here, what would you say, everybody has a different definition of success, right? And so for you, it's going to mean something that's a little bit different maybe than even a younger version of of yourself. And that's kind of what I want to ask here is like, from being a younger musician, a guy that was playing in bands in high school and just doing and gigging and just like, hey, I'll be a broke musician the rest of my life, I just love this, I'm okay with it, to getting this business, taking it over, taking it seriously, realizing you have to look at numbers and all of that kind of thing. Like, and now you run this multi-location, over 800 students. Like, you are, very successful in this business and in a very small group of music school owners all around the world, honestly, that have accomplished what you've accomplished. So, like, has your perspective on success changed
Mm.
over the years?
Yes and no. I think I think what it boils down to is still pretty simple because again, it all started from the teaching aspect just came from, hey, I really love teaching. And the reason why I love teaching is just, like we talked about at the beginning, music was such a thing for me that if I could give that to other people, that's the best thing that I can be doing. You know what I mean? So really, that has been kind of the through line. Now the hows and the whats of to do that have definitely had to change as I've learned, and I'm sure more. I'm going to be learning more and trying to do even more. But to me, success, and I tell this when I interview people and everything, like I really just truly mean for me personally, like my goal is just to make more creatives in the world because I think that makes the world a better place, and I think that's going to get more and more and more important with all this other stuff that you and I think especially David could chat about for hours when it comes to AI and all that stuff. I think creatives are going to win, and I also think that creatives, I think that can bring you a lot more happiness in your life, and I think a lot of people are missing out on that nowadays. And if you're teaching an 8-year old right now, they're going to graduate high school and what is that in 2035. I'm not going to pretend to know what 2035 looks like, right? Like, no way. But because of that, I think we need to make people more creative. And I'm doing that through music because that's just what I know the best. If I was an art teacher, then I would be trying to do it through art. If I was a writer, I'd be trying to do it through, writing. But yeah, I just want to make more creatives in the world, 100%. And that's what success looks like to me. And importantly, not just the elites of the world. Like we've had plenty of students go off to good schools with good scholarships. I'm very proud of that, but I don't want to have the environment that turns away 40 other students because we only have an environment like that. And that also means responsibility for me to pivot and adjust, and whether that's the curriculum we use, whether that's how we pay teachers, whatever. I'm always just trying to think, great, we have X number of people who are hopefully more creative because of what we're doing. How can we do more? Right? Or what's in our current systems that's stopping us from getting to higher numbers or doing things in different ways? So long-winded answer, I guess, I suppose, and probably a little cheesy, but it's the truth, David. It's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, that's kind of where you're coming from. You're a
Yeah.
creative guy
Mhm.
and you got this whole journey started as a musician. And that's really the way I think it very few music school owners that I've met over the years didn't start as a musician
Yeah.
first, right? Like
Mhm.
usually you start as a musician, you have a passion for the thing, and then you want to teach it, and then you realize, oh, hey, I have a business, maybe I should learn about that, and then you move forward with that. Um, which brings me to my next question. You're a digital guru, like you basically take digital ads for people for music schools specifically. You've kind of niched yourself, which is cool, and you help music school owners with their digital marketing. So talk about Nine Muses Digital and what problem are you solving?
Yeah, so like you said, I niched down because at the end of the day, everything is still mission for me. So as I was learning this stuff, I'll be honest, we didn't even talk about this and we don't have to get into it. But while I was also running the school, I had kind of my own little, yeah, I learned all about this marketing stuff. And I was like, can I do this for other people? And I'll be honest, some of the pay was good. Doing this for chiropractors and dentists and stuff was great. But at the end of the day, I was just like, I don't for me, my mission isn't to make people's teeth better. You know what I mean? That's not where I'm
Yeah.
at, right?
Yeah.
So I got rid of all those clients, and now I'm just trying to put all my energy towards that with other music schools because I don't really want a 15 location music school. That doesn't seem to super excite me, at least at this point in my life. And but if I can help somebody in Dallas or whatever, I don't want a music school in Dallas. I'm nowhere near Dallas. But if I can help somebody else get some more students with Google advertising or Meta advertising, then I still feel like I'm achieving my mission, right? And helping out, and because this is something that a lot of people struggle with as well. It took me a long time to figure some of this stuff out, and not everybody has that time. I'm here to kind of help out with that and get more music students kind of across the world with my little. If I can contribute in some kind of small way with that, I'm pumped up about it.
That's cool. Yeah, no, and I think it's smart to niche down, niche
Sure.
down to just with music schools. It's what you're passionate about. So do you handle everything? Like when people work with you, I mean, can you just do a part of it? Do you do all the copy? Like what all do you do when someone signs up with you?
Yeah, pretty much everything. So The best way to think about it is any of the dorky stuff is what I do. Okay.
Okay.
So all the looking at the numbers. And so in some ways it's even, I use the word marketing because it's a little bit easier for folks, but really my role is more like media buying is the more official kind of term for things, meaning I want to take some pieces of creative that you have, and then I want to find the best way to make those make you money. Right. And sometimes that's optimizing, that's looking at different things. So I do tweak copy, and I do copy because that's a big part of it. I don't do like the images or the videos. I don't have like a creative department or anything like that. And then another big part of that is some other dorky stuff like tracking. So a lot of people don't know what their numbers are from their marketing. So I set up tracking systems for people and let them show, hey, this is how many leads you got from this, and how many leads you got from that, and what does that mean for you. So kind of just the back end, non pretty stuff is what I focus on.
Sure. Okay. Okay. So basically all the stuff that people don't want to have to deal with. Because Google, like, it's crazy. Google changes all the time and it drives me nuts.
Dude,
And
Meta
like,
2 nowadays, yeah,
yeah.
it's a whole thing. And the problem is they assume that you know. Like, it's really not that bad. How much they change is annoying even for somebody like me, but if you know how the Google ecosystem works in general, then you can kinda be like, "Oh, okay, they're just doing it this way now. Got it." But if
Hmm.
you don't have the years of before of how they were doing it and why they're changing it and how they're changing it, like, coming into that clean is just, and they don't give resources that they should. I'll be honest. Like in the early days, I used to be able to call Google and I would speak to somebody from Google in California, and I would just say, "Hey, like," and not, I would just say, "Hey, like, can you look at my accounts?" And they go, "Sure, no problem," right? And then I remember I would like hang up, and then I go, "Hey, cool, thanks so much." I'd hang up, and then I'd call again, and I'd ask a different person the same questions just to like get different, like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's how I learned everything. And
Wow.
people, you can't do that much anymore. They kind of just they just give people scripts and let them go for it. These people don't know what they're really talking about, regardless of where they're from. It's just Google just gives it to like the most early employees and say, "Hey, call up this person and tell them to change their ads." And it's some terrible scheme to just make Google more money and not the small business owner. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's obviously a very specific ad that you run as a music school versus like a service-based business or some other,
Mm-hmm.
like a chiropractor, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got I'm assuming you've got scripts and ads that you run regularly that work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Especially
So
on Google.
and so do you use those for like some of your clients because you know they'll work and they're tested and all that kind of thing?
Exactly, and that's what's nice. So every market's going to be a little bit different, of course. So you do need somebody who's in there and testing things and trying new things, which is what I do. But there's certain things that I've just learned from both my school and with other people over the past 10 years. That it's like, well, we're going to start here so that we don't have to do all the other stuff that past Mike had to learn the hard way. You know what I mean? So we're at least starting off with a better jumping off point, and then building and expanding and tweaking from there.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I'm
Yeah.
assuming you use all those same strategies for Loud and Clear or your music school?
Yeah. In fact, Loud and Clear is kinda like the testing ground most of the time for a lot of them. So I try to test them on me before I test them on anybody else. Just in case there's sometimes there's swings and misses, that always happens in marketing, right? So yeah, we try a lot of stuff with Loud and Clear, and then we build it up, and once we got something working, we try it with other folks, and if that works, then we keep scaling it up.
So do you have like a website or a place where people can go find you to do a discovery call with you and see if you can work together?
Yeah, nice and easy. It's just 9musesdigital.com. That's with the number 9. So the number 9, MUSES digital.com.
Cool. Well, I will put that in the show notes for sure, so people can check it out. So,
Yeah.
Mike, thanks so much. What an amazing story. I'm super impressed with all that you've accomplished, and I love like just your down to earth approach to this, and I really appreciate you. And like I said, I've coached with you in the Build a Music School program, which, in my opinion, is the best coaching program that's out there, with all of the libraries and all the faculty of coaches and everything. So
Yeah, definitely.
so you are very active in this community. You've worked with lots of music schools, so everything that you're talking about here is so relevant, to this industry, and I really do believe you're making a big difference not just in your local community, but also in the industry at large. So thank you so much for
Hey, that's
everything
what
that
I'm
you do.
shooting for, man. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting with you, dude.
Awesome.